Hi there, this is Solitary Ronan from Solitary Ronan Films, and welcome to another neglected gem. Today's neglected gem is Abel Ferrara's The Funeral from 1996. As you can see, this is just a DVD. I do believe there's rumours of a French Blu-ray somewhere, but I can't really find it. Again, another neglected gem that comes from the 90s. They all seem to be neglected gems from the 90s that I seem to be doing. This was shot pretty much at the same time as The Addiction, which came out in 95, which also had Christopher Walken and Annabella Sciorra. This also stars Vincent Gallo, Chris Penn, Benicio Del Toro, Isabella Rossellini, Gretchen Mol, there's a blink and you'll miss it, Edie Falco, and there's one scene with David Patrick Kelly. Vic Argo, the Abel Ferrara stalwart, makes an appearance as well. So it's a really good cast. Obviously it's a low budget film because it's Ferrara, set in the 1930s, but really has a wonderful sense of time and place. And it's essentially about three brothers played by Penn, Walken and Gallo. It's called The Funeral because, strangely enough, it's based around a funeral. This isn't really a spoiler or anything, but Vincent Gallo, it's his funeral. The film opens with Gallo watching Humphrey Bogart in the cinema, very much like in King of New York. The Triads are watching a film in the cinema as well. And the title song is Gloomy Sunday, which pretty much sums up the film. It's a very nihilistic, grim film. It might be too grim for some people, but I do think it's one of Ferrara's best, and it's certainly one of the best scripts of a Ferrara film. It's great dialogue. Walken especially gets some great speeches or monologues. Written by Nicholas St. John, who for years I actually thought was just Abel Ferrara under a different name. The same way Ned Rifle, who does the music for Hal Hartley films, is actually Hal Hartley. But I do think Nicholas St. John is actually a different person than Abel Ferrara, but I've never seen both of them in the same room. And the music's by Ferrara regular Joe Delia. So after the credits, we see it's Gallo's funeral, and obviously Walken and Penn are upset at their brothers being shot dead, and the film is basically about them trying to find out who did it. And Sciorra, Walken's wife, wants him to let the authorities do their job and not take it into their hands, but you know, they're gangsters. But this isn't The Godfather, this isn't a stately kind of high class gangster film. This is more realistic because it is Ferrara. This is more street. So they think that perhaps Benicio Del Toro, who is another gang leader, he did it because Vincent Gallo has been stooping his wife 3 times a week. But that might not necessarily be the case. Actually finding out who did it isn't really the main point of the film. It's really about the psychology of these characters. And this is actually one of those rare gangster films where the women are actually probably more interesting or more important than the men. And again, it's a really good script. So they're kind of paired as Vincent Gallo and Gretchen Mol is kind of an outsider to the family, and by all accounts, at some point she would be getting married to Vincent Gallo. You have Sciorra, who's very religious. She's married to Walken, who's not, even though he believes he's going to rot in hell for what he's done. And then we have Rossellini and Penn, which is a kind of strange marriage. It's almost like a mother and son relationship rather than a husband and wife. The brother's father committed suicide, and the belief is there's insanity that runs in the family, and Chris Penn is the one that suffers from it. I mean, Chris Penn gives a interesting performance as somebody who's struggling with mental health, but obviously in the 1930s, the issue of mental health wasn't really treated properly. He obviously has these bouts of domestic violence with Rossellini, and really one of the big questions that's kind of brought up in the film is why do women end up with these kinds of men? Now obviously sometimes it's lifestyle and more money and more clothes and more material wealth, but there's a great scene with Sciorra and Moll, and Sciorra is talking about how lucky that Gretchen Moll's character is not to end up married to him, because these men haven't kind of got past their illiterate upbringing. You know, they're thugs. They see themselves as something a little bit, you know, more noble than that or something, but at the end of the day they're criminals, they're thugs, which always begs the question, well, why do the women have anything to do with them? And it's a question that I always find fascinating, because let's be honest, men do terrible things. I mean, women do as well, but men in general do more terrible things. But generally, the majority of heterosexual women end up with a man, even though men are generally disgusting and awful. And it's just like, why do you have anything to do with men? And Sciorra is saying, you know, she went to college for a couple of years before she met Ray, Christopher Walken's character, and she's kind of bemoaning, but now she's like trapped in this world, and it's like, well, why did you have anything to do with him in the first place? So there's lots of interesting things like that. There's also kind of religious discussions that Sciorra has with Walken as well, because like I said, she's kind of religious, whereas Walken isn't, even though there's a couple of times in the film he does talk about he's going to rot in hell for the things that he's done during his life. The film kind of works in flashback. You know, Vincent Gallo doesn't spend the whole time sitting in a coffin or lying in a coffin. So Vincent Gallo is kind of getting into communism. And this is the scene with David Patrick Kelly as a speaker. And again, it's the communism versus the capitalism. You know, there's a scene where Benicio del Toro brings in this factory owner who wants protection from Walken's crew or family, and Gallo's the one that's kind of like, you know, standing up for the workers. So you have that kind of friction. I mean, it's not really explored that much in the film. Again, it's probably just for budget. I mean, the film's just over an hour and a half. Ferrara never had the money in his career to do like a 2.5 hour epic. Not they probably would anyway. So you have Gallo's character again kind of going into the political kind of side. You have Chris Penn struggling with his mental health, but also, you know, brutalizing women, including Rossellini's wife. So Penn's doing a lot of kind of extreme emotional swings. Gallo is doing a very mannered, tick-filled performance. Del Toro is at his most mannered. So you actually have, you don't see it very often, but Walken actually gives it, he's kind of the anchor because yes, there's a couple of Walken line deliveries that are wonderful, but in general, Walken is the one that's walking the actual midline of the performance. He's still excellent. Walken gets all the best monologues. You know, there's a scene with Del Toro where he's basically saying, you know, why as gangsters do we have to shoot each other? Why do we have to kill each other? We should actually be getting together and taking over the Ford Motor Company, which in actual fact is an argument that Gallo is kind of making, that why don't all the workers unite and actually take over? But Walken takes it from the aspect of, you know, why don't gangsters just get together instead of fighting each other all the time? There's a great scene where Walken is talking to Gallo's corpse in the casket, and asking him what it's like. There's a wonderful scene, like I said, with Sciorra and Walken when they're talking about religious philosophy, basically. There's also a wonderful explanation of why gangsters don't go to each other's funerals, which is another brilliant scene. So it's a really underrated and kind of underseen film. Again, it's not on Blu-ray, but for me it's one of Walken's best, it's one of Ferrara's best, and again, it's such a good script, great dialogue, and it has a real oppressive, dread-filled atmosphere. The music's really good. Again, the title song, Gloomy Sunday, really sums it up. You can tell perhaps where the ending is coming from, but it's still pretty shocking when it actually happens. Chris Penn even sings a song at one point. I mean, what more could you ask for than Chris Penn singing? But it's really a rare gangster film where, like, Annabella Sciorra's character is really good and one of the strongest characters in the actual film, whereas there's so many gangster films where the women are literally just background, and they have kind of more of the importance. You know, Rossellini's character kind of wants Chris Penn to go to this, you know, clinic, and but of course he's not interested, even though he obviously needs help. The flashbacks are done very well. You know, Gallows is shot outside a cinema in the film that's playing is Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, not the Shane Black film, which is obviously a nice little detail. It's just a wonderful Abel Ferrara film that doesn't get talked about enough. Great performances, despite sometimes them being a little bit mannered, from like Del Toro. You know, at one point he's clicking his teeth and flicking his teeth, but it's just a wonderful, grim, nihilistic, apocalyptic gangster film from Ferrara. So thanks very much for watching this episode of Neglected Gem. Tell me what you think of The Funeral if you've seen it, and where does it rank in Ferrara's work. And hopefully join me again for more Neglected Gems. This is Soldier Ronan from Soldier Ronan Films, saying farewell.